Hi, peeps. You're listening to She's My Cherry Pie, the baking podcast from the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessie Sheehan. I'm a baker, recipe developer, and author of 4 baking books, including Salty, Cheesy, Herby, Crispy, Snackable Bakes. On each episode, I hang out with the sweetest bakers around and take a deep dive into their signature bakes. I'm so excited to kick off 2025 with a brand new season. Thanks to everyone who tuned in last year. We have a lot of talented guests and delicious baked goods to talk about, so get ready for a sweet year. My guest today is Betül Tunç, the culinary superstar behind the widely popular social media accounts Turkuaz Kitchen. Betül is a recipe developer and photographer and now a published author. She's from Turkey but lives in Virginia, where she creates some of the most beautiful recipe videos around. And don't just take my word for it. She has over 10 million followers on Instagram and over 2 million on TikTok. Betül's debut cookbook, Turkuaz Kitchen Traditional and Modern Dough Recipes for Sweet and Savory Bakes, was released last year, and hence her Instagram account come to life with gorgeous photography and delicious recipes. She joins me today to talk about her childhood in Turkey, the solace that baking brings, what it's like to be an exacting perfectionist, and her social media accounts and how they grew. Then we take a deep dive into her book and her recipe for Turkish pistachio baklava. I loved learning all about Betül and baklava, so stay tuned for our chat. Cherry Bomb's next issue is all about love, and I think you're going to love the cover. It features Elona, Olivia, and Adriana Marr, the sister trio that has won everyone's hearts for their positive message of confidence and self-love. The issue is full of joyful stories and recipes. The issue will be out on February 13th, aka Galentine's Day, aka our favorite holiday. If you're a subscriber, you'll receive your issue first. If you're not a subscriber, sign up by Friday, February 7th to get this issue and the following 3 issues of Cherry Bomb magazine. Subscribers always get free shipping, so head to cherrybomb.com to become a subscriber or pre-order the issue. We know the world needs a little more love right now, so we hope you'll pick up a copy. Let's chat with today's guest. Betül, so excited to have you on She's My Cherry Pie and to talk pistachio baklava with you and so much more.
Thank you so much, Jessie. It is so nice to meet you, and thank you so much for having me.
So you now live in Virginia. You're originally from Erzurum in northeastern Turkey. I love this description, a place of snowy, frosty winters where you fell in love with baking and dough making when you were 8 years old, maybe even younger, and making kete with your mom. So can you, first of all, describe kete for us?
It is a kind of a Turkish version of croissant, I think. You rolling the dough a little like a pig, and then you oil the dough, and then you just roll it, and then you make that kind of like a kete shape. It is so flaky and so delicious. It is Turkish croissant, and I started my journey with this pastry.
Would you say that was like your earliest baking memory when you were making kete with your mother? Because I also know that there's a memory perhaps of your mom giving you a little bit of dough to play with, almost like it was Play-Doh, and maybe that was one of your earliest baking memories?
Exactly. I came from a huge foodie family, and my mom and my older sister are really great cook. And then their main focus always just to make delicious pastries and delicious food. And then I just spent my childhood to sit with them and then to learn all of the things from them, the basics from them. And then I was sitting with them and then I was watching. And then sometimes my mom used to give me a just small piece of dough. And then I was just spending time with them just to roll it and shape it. So yeah, my early memories coming from my 3 years old age. And I
Wow.
think they're so early. So yeah, it started very early.
I love that. I love that. And I also read that your dad gave you a rolling pin and maybe a little rolling table for your 4th birthday. Is that right?
That exactly. It was my first special toy. It was so lovely. He saw me, I'm just spending time with them, and then I'm just struggling to find a place around them. And then he gave me this beautiful custom size, a small child size of rolling pin and rolling table. And then it was so lovely. And it was, I still like, my mom still keep it in the house, and it's so
Oh
lovely.
my gosh. And so your dad, he knew to give you that gift because he saw how, interested in your mother and your sister and the work they were doing with baking. That's part of the reason. But was it also your family was sort of interested in food? I think you had maybe uncles who had restaurants. Like it was being attached to food and restaurants and cooking and baking was sort of in your blood, as it were.
Exactly. I totally agree. Yes, my uncles and my cousins are chef owners. They have several restaurants in Turkey and they are so popular. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think like a baking and cooking in my blood. And this is a family job, like just I find it in my life too.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And also your mother, you said both your mother and your sister were these incredible cooks and baker, but your mom was your teacher, right? I mean, she taught you, she taught your older sister, and she was sounds as if she is so expert at her like bread baking and patisserie baking and dessert baking, etc.
Exactly. She's the master of my life, my personal like cooking and baking journey. Also, yes, but and also learned so many things from my older sister too. They're so talented, and then they just love cooking and baking as much as I do. Especially, I learn everything with my older sister, and then we learn everything together. We watch all of the TV show. We tried all of the recipes together. Yes, my mom and my older sister are really great cook, and then I learn everything from them.
How much older is your sister than you? I know you have three
She,
sisters, or you're one of three?
I'm the like a fourth one, and
Yes.
I have three older sister, and yes, the youngest one. We learn everything together.
Oh.
She's 6 years older than me.
Is there another baked good besides kete, or maybe like your mom's favorite or your sister's favorite, that you remember from childhood as well?
Yeah, we heard just so many like a traditional name. I don't want to just say them because they're a little like a different, even if they're Turkish. There was a kind of like a fried dough recipe, just we were making with a basic pizza dough. My dad used to buy it from the bakery just around the corner, and then he bring us a piece of dough, and then my mom used to prepare a filling, kind of like with a ground beef or sometimes with a potato, and then she made kind of like a fried dough with a filling, ground meat filling or a potato filling. It was so yummy, so delicious. We were eating that just for as a breakfast. Like Turkish breakfast, a little different than the like other culture. It is so rich and so many items in that. And then we generally just eat Turkish breakfast as a lunch and brunch. It's kind of like a brunch, I would say, and so many items in that, and so many hot appetizer in the menu. She used to make it as a weekend breakfast item, and it was so delicious. The smell was so amazing.
Well, I always joke that fried is my favorite food. So that sounds so delicious to me. Just the minute that you said fried, I was like, yes, please.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, it's turned out so perfect.
Yeah,
I know it is like any carb, like high carb things turn
yes.
out.
And I love it that your dad was involved, that he was the one who bought the dough and then brought it home, and then your mom was the one who made it. It was like a family affair.
Exactly.
When you were in middle school, you took a break from school for a few years,
Mhm.
and that was the time when you got super, super into baking. You've said that like baking is an activity that maybe you learned to really love during that period of time. It's one that can give you solace and make you raise your spirits or put you in a better mindset.
Exactly. Exactly. Actually, I would say it wasn't easy for me as an extrovert teenager to be at home, but you find a beauty any like a strange time. I find myself in the kitchen every single time when I feel lost and depressive. With this way, I find my passion, and I was like, okay, I have to cook more. And then I was tasting and making new recipes every single time. It was a exactly culinary school for me, and then I learned everything from that day.
Now, I wonder if you could like describe for us your baking or dessert style. Maybe tell us like what inspires your recipes. I think it has maybe to do with like a craving of home and maybe some nostalgia.
Actually, I try to make what I really love and my family love. And maybe you just realize that I generally choose the recipes that their comfort for every culture, like a very common, delicious food. I'm not a person to try like a different flavor with a different dish. So I always go with the comfort foods, and everybody loves that. And everybody loves like a good pizza and delicious pastries and a good pastry cream in it, like that
Yes.
kind of foods.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Peeps, have you heard about Cherry Bomb's Jubilee? It's our annual conference for women in food, drink, and hospitality, and it's happening Saturday, April 12th in New York City. I always love being at Jubilee and connecting with other bakers, pastry chefs, and cookbook authors. If you'd like to join us, you can get tickets at cherrybomb.com. If you're an official Bomb Squad member, check your inbox for special member pricing. I hope to see you there. Now back to our guest. And now you've also said, like, in terms of your cooking philosophy, you want everything to taste delicious, but also visually to bring about an emotional experience, or at least be really like beautiful and appetizing. Like those two things go hand in hand in your baking and cooking.
Definitely. It is so important for me. I'm not a picky person. I wasn't when I was a childhood, but I always choose my food based on how they look exactly. And then if they look delicious, I feel like okay, I can eat that. And also I can understand if the food is delicious when I see that. Like if I'm just searching any recipes in the online and on Instagram, if I'm just searching something in my explore page, and I was like, okay, this is really good. I wanted to make it. If it looks delicious, you feel like you have to understand it is so delicious based on like while looking at the photo. It's so important.
You have described yourself as a croissant. Can you please unpack the qualities that make you a croissant?
I'm a hard person. If you think the final product, you feel you can't just say, yeah, this is so good. So like delicious and perfect. But look at the process and the making and the, like a struggling process is so hard. So it is the only dish, only the item that I can explain myself. Like I am a croissant. I am not an easy person.
And you talked about the layers, like there are many layers to you, there are many layers to the croissant.
Definitely,
Yes,
definitely.
I love that. So you are the founder of the social media phenomenon, Turkuaz Kitchen. You make these incredible sort of vintage style videos with this very unique aesthetic. The wardrobe, the utensils, the cookware, everything is very 19th century, very deliberate, very thoughtful. Can you tell us how this idea came to you to dress like that in your videos and to have special equipment in your videos? Like, where did that come from?
Thank you so much, first of all, for your kind words. Yeah, I loved vintage always. It's because I think my mom too. She really loved to use my grandma's antique tools and utensils in her kitchen. And also just I think I have so many memories about that. So lovely memories from that days. And my mom is using my grandma's antique tools in her like baking and cooking recipes, just baking and cooking while making something delicious. And also, just before start my Instagram journey, I had a small collection with my own tech tools. After starting to shoot my own recipes, and then I just started to use my my antique tools and utensils for my photographs because I find them so like aesthetic. I love them so much. And then I was shooting so many kind of like that kind of photographs before I start shooting videos. And then I switched my style into the videos, and then it's randomly happen. And then people really love that kind of like utensils to see the different kind of like old fashioned items while making modern recipes. And then with their feedback, according to their feedbacks, and I find more items, and then I try to just visit more antique stores and find different items from different antique stores. And just meanwhile, it just happen, and then I find my own style just into a just 18th century kitchen.
I love that so much, Betül, and it also has a very like theatrical quality. You've described yourself as an extrovert. I feel like there's something kind of theatrical and very open and kind of like, look at this about what you do, which is so beautiful and fun and different than what anyone else is doing on the platform and on TikTok as well. It's so interesting and cool.
Thank you. It is so nice to hear that from you, really.
Oh,
And yeah, I really love that. And I'm so happy to hear the people's feedback about that. They find them so therapeutic, and then they watch them as a therapy, and then they just keep saying, Betül, we watch them. Of course, they love my recipes, and then they find them so helpful, and they really love to try my recipes and trust recipes. But at the same time, some of the people, they don't know cooking and baking, but they only watch the videos for like a therapeutic reason, for the relax and a little bit. And just they say, we find a peace in this chaotic world and on your videos, and we really love to watch them just before go to bed. Or some of the people, they are just saying, we are watching your videos because we are having a really hard time, and they help us to just deal with them, like it is so kind. And I love to hear that. And it's work, I think, like you said, they're a little theatrical, but it's work to make people to feel a little more comfortable.
Yeah,
And
and
just
also it's like you're giving back to people what you felt with baking. It was, it gave you solace and made you feel better in like a dark time. And it's the style of the videos and kind of being transported into this 19th century kitchen is giving everyone else those feelings too.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's really
Yeah.
nice. And I think in the beginning, or maybe this is still true, you only ever really showed your hands, not your face.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. It
And
is
is
a
that
part of my brand.
that's a part of it too, that it's still your hands and the baked good, it's not your whole face.
In the just near future, I'm gonna start YouTube videos with my antique historical kitchen. But yes, it is gonna be only on YouTube,
Yep,
and I'm gonna continue this style in Instagram
I love it.
because people love that.
And then tell us about the clothes. Did you already have a collection of sort of vintage clothes, or was that something that you had to build up as you were thinking about the photographs and the videos?
I love fashion. I had some kind of like a very fancy, like beautiful shirts and skirts before, but it started with an apron. I use just antique apron in my videos, and then people really love that, and they find it so beautiful. And then I purchase more items just like this, and then I find my style. I actually like it is a part of again part of the brand, and people really love to see the different outfit that I'm using in my videos. So I try to find the beautiful pieces from different store, and then they find sometimes from like again antique stores, and some of the belts and some of the beautiful like fancy shirts. And I think like yes, this is another like a part of the videos.
I read that your dad is a tailor, so like maybe clothes are like an important part. There's food in your family, but there's also like clothes and fashion in your family.
Has the most beautiful aesthetic.
Oh,
Like
wow.
I always ask him if I have something, if I'm gonna do something, and I love his aesthetic. It is so beautiful.
I also love hearing that you are very kind of your choices about your content and about your artistry and your creativity are driven in part by what your followers and your people and the people that love you are telling you that they love. And then you said,
Exactly.
"Oh, you guys love this apron? Okay, I'm going to get more aprons."
It is the most important thing just for me. I always listen my followers feedbacks, and just I love to listen them because they're the audience. They really why what I want to do. They really know what I want to see. And then even if I'm just creating a recipes, I listen their feedbacks and what they love exactly. And then what they wanted to just try, which one is easy, what they wanted to see more.
Yes.
I always listen their feedbacks and what they say, and then just I continue to create more content and could just to do or change something according to their feedbacks. And it is the biggest rule for me.
So it was sort of your husband who encouraged you to get onto Instagram in the first place, correct? And he bought you your first camera. And like when it was still not videos yet, he sort of encouraged you. I think you were having like maybe a little bit of a lonely time. You guys had just moved to Chicago. Instagram was sort of, again, just like baking has helped you in a hard time. Instagram also helped in this instance.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to just say, I know he's gonna just hear that, but I would love to just say that he's the biggest supporter of my life.
Oh,
I'm so lucky to have him. Really, he's the biggest chance in my life, and he support me a lot. He believe than what I do myself. Like,
yeah.
and so this is, I think, most important things. And yes, he encouraged me to start an Instagram page, and he encouraged me to just shoot my own photographs. And he just pushed me to start to shoot up videos instead photos, and just he pushed me, and then he just encouraged me a lot. And then, yes, I just owe so many things to him. And thank you so much.
Oh, he sounds
Thank
amazing. When it started, it was photographs, but you were sort of using your vintage utensils and then vintage aprons, etc. And then when it became video, I think there was one video that really exploded. Was it like a punching down dough video?
Yes. The first viral video was bread recipe. I was making with some kind of like a Turkish breakfast spread. We call it acuka. It's a kind of like a breakfast spread, roasted pepper,
Mhm.
red roasted pepper. So it was really delicious. And then people really love that bread recipe. And then, but the video has started with like a punching dough part. And then it was like, okay, what happened? Because it was a hit. And then immediately I was 28K in the States. And then the video went 1 million or something. And then just, it was a big hit for me. And then my husband again was like, okay, you find your thing, and then you have to continue to shoot more that kind of videos. And people really love your dough recipes. And then I was like, okay, I have to shoot one more. And then immediately I made chocolate babka. It went 8 million.
Oh
And
my
then
gosh.
again, after that, it was another viral video of mine. But I realized that people love the punch down recipes,
Yes.
like it was a kind of like a key and a starting point for
Y-
my brand.
Yes. And when you say punch down, we should picture like a big ball of dough that has
Ah,
just risen and sort of your fist going right down in the middle.
definitely.
Yes.
It's starting with a perfect risen dough, and then I open it, and then I just punching the dough.
Yeah.
And then it was like, it started with this way.
And I mean, now you have more than 10 million followers on Instagram and 2 million on TikTok and almost 4 million on YouTube. Maybe those numbers have even changed a little bit, but it's mind boggling. I mean, I'm sure to you as well. It's just like, oh my gosh. Like when that first happened, was your jaw just on the ground? Like,
Yes, exactly. Until the book tour, I
yeah,
was seeing only numbers,
yeah.
Jesse. They were number. Of course, I was getting so many beautiful DMs and messages from the people, but you can realize how big the love. But with my book tour, it was magical to see the people excitement, and then to hear their feedbacks face to face,
Oh,
and then seeing their excitement, and then listening their stories and memories. I was like, what I did exactly, like
yes.
what I am doing, I can't stop doing it. It
Oh,
was exactly magical.
oh, I love that. I know we have to get into the book and the recipe, but just quickly tell us about the incredible anthropology. Is it called like the Posey collection?
Yes.
Yeah,
It,
tell
it,
us about your partnership with anthropology.
it was amazing. It was really a great journey for me. I'm using different kind of like utensils in my recipes and my videos, and then people keep asking me where they can find these items. And then I was always thinking to have my product line. And then I went to my manager, and then to with the idea like to have a product line with one of my favorite brands. And then she went to anthropology immediately, and then the response was so positive from them. And immediately we started to work with them. The team was so talented. The design team was amazing. I sent them to all of my just favorite items, and then they came back to idea with kind of like a Turkish pattern ideas. It was an amazing surprise for me, and then it was so lovely, and people really loved them. It was a bestseller collection from Anthropology, and then they sold out immediately. They can just bring back some of the items again. I still like, I can't believe we did that, and it was another magical journey for me.
So I want to talk about your new book, Turkuaz Kitchen. It's, 85 recipes for sweet and savory doughs and dishes to make with them. And you've said that dough chose you. You did not choose dough because that's what you kind of grew up watching and making with your mother and your sister. But the inspiration is there's traditional Turkish recipes as well as recipes you've discovered while traveling. Were you approached? Like, did someone call you and say, would you like to write a cookbook? Or did you know you wanted to write a cookbook? How did it come to be?
I have always a dream Like it wasn't one of my childhood dream. It was just you have to see my childhood notebook. I have just have so many page with my signature because I was pretending signing my cookbook. Just it was a dream of mine, my childhood dream. I knew sometime I'm gonna write my cookbook, but like you have some dreams, you never just feel like it's gonna come out so early, and then sometime you feel, but you never can believe it. Yeah, always had an idea. When I get a popular in social media, I get different offer from different publisher. I got so many offer, and then I was like, okay, I think this is the time. First of all, I'm so scared because it was like so new, and then I was like, if I can do that, and then my husband again, he said like, you are doing that exactly right now. You are like preparing recipes, and then you're sharing with the people. What is the difference? Why you're just so scared to have this with this idea? And it was like, okay, no, this is different because it is so more serious, and this is a huge project. And then he was like, no, I believe in you. You can do that. And then we started to work with Tansipit from Penguin Random House. And then we talked with my editor and was like, okay, I'm doing it. And then I know just what I'm gonna do. And then I have an idea, and I have so many recipes, but I have to just organize it and to feel like to just decide what I'm gonna do. It was the most beautiful at the same time. It was the hardest journey in my life. There are so many similarities with my first pregnancy. I feel like I gave birth my second child right now. It was just like my first pregnancy. You're so care. What are you doing exactly? You have so many concern, and then you wanted to do everything so beautiful, and you're so careful, and then you don't know, you don't have any experience, and it was just complicated, but it was really so, again, it is so lovely, and then you wanted to just enjoy all of the just process, and then to feel like, whoa, I'm just working on my childhood dream, just kind of things. But it was amazing.
All right, now finally we're going to talk about Turkish pistachio baklava. This is a dough from the Turkish dough chapter of the book, and
Mhm,
baklava is a world-renowned Turkish dessert. There are kind of two versions. There's a bakery version, and then there's sort
mhm.
of a home-style baklava version, which we're going to talk about. Can you tell us about the bakery version? Is quite challenging with lots of thin sheets of dough rolled out by master bakers. It's not something the home cook would necessarily do, or the home baker.
Exactly. It is a little different because the dough include only just a few ingredients, basic ingredients, flour, water, and just sometimes just only a little bit egg. It is so hard to roll it so thin. So because it is a little tough dough, you can roll it as a home baker. You have to roll it so thin. So for this reason, there are two types. In the house, people are just adding a little more ingredients, such as like oil, milk, and sometimes yogurt to make the dough a little bit softer and then to roll it easier. It is really hard to make. It is not easy recipe. So I'm so happy to talk about the Turkish baklava today because I know this is the hardest recipe in this cookbook. And there's so many tips and so many different techniques to make it like perfect.
Yes.
But again, I try to find the easiest way to
Yes.
make it. And then because we added butter and natural oil and a little bit milk, and then the dough is so soft and so easy to roll to make it.
Your eldest sister is a baklava master. I love this. Before developing the recipe for your cookbook, you had never made baklava before because it involves cornstarch. Cornstarch triggers you. You hate the
Like,
way
okay.
it feels. So you had to begin your baklava journey with gloved hands, which I just think is totally hilarious and awesome. What's great about this recipe is you just roll it out with a simple roller. It's
Mhm.
loaded with delicious, like deeply aromatic Turkish pistachios, although you can substitute walnuts or regular pistachios. How are Turkish pistachios different, and are they easy to buy, like at a specialty grocery store? Where could we find them if we wanted them for this recipe?
Yes, exactly. It is totally different than regular pistachio. It is so delicious. I highly recommend to use Turkish pistachio for the baklava, even if they're making baklava with a store-bought fila dough. It is not important. But this Turkish pistachio is totally different. The smell is different. The taste is so different. And also the color is so different. So If there can't find the pistachio, I would love to just I would love to just recommend them to use walnut instead pistachio. It make it a little bit delicious and it is so good. But it is easy to find. I find a brand because I generally just buy them from Turkey when I visit Turkey every summer, and then I just bring some of them with me. But this time I was testing recipe for cookbook. I tasted just several times, and then just I I just finalized. Well, just finish all of my just pistachios, and I have to find a good quality Turkish pistachio. And I found the brand. It's called US Nut. I love their products, and then they're just like what I buy from Turkey. It is so delicious, and the smell is so good.
So, in a medium bowl, in your videos, you'd be doing this in a ceramic bowl or maybe something from your anthropology line. But if you're off camera, is there a specific kind of mixing bowl you like to use, or do you use a ceramic bowl even when you're off camera?
I love using glass bowl.
Mm-hmm.
It is my go-to.
Yep.
I don't know why, because I got to use them in Turkey.
Yep.
Just it is a tradition for me. I generally use just glass
Yep.
bowl.
Me too. So, in a medium bowl, we're going to whisk. And do you have a specific kind of whisk that you like when you're not on camera?
I use dough hook generally from Williams Sonoma
Yep.
if I'm just whisking dough,
Yep.
and you can use any kind of
Yep.
like dough.
So we're going to whisk some room temperature milk. And
Mhm.
is it usually whole milk?
Yes, whole milk.
Is this the place where we might substitute some yogurt if we wanted?
No, not really. Like it is a little bit different. They can use instead milk because the texture is different, and then
Okay.
it's just the texture.
Yep.
Let's go with
the milk. Okay, so we'll whisk some room temperature whole milk. We'll whisk an egg, some melted unsalted butter, and some neutral oil. Why do we want butter and oil?
It's affect the texture. It's just I love to use natural oil for my dough because it's affect the texture a little bit slightly, and it's make it a little softer instead butter. So I generally use hazelnut oil when I was in Turkey. It was so common. I was using always in my baking recipes. But in here, I found peanut oil instead. I really love to use that. I prefer to use peanut oil, but
Okay.
they can use natural oil.
And then we're also going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar. So I had
Mhm.
two questions. First of all, is there a brand? And also, are we adding the vinegar to kind of curdle the milk, almost like we're replicating buttermilk with that tang?
You can think like we are making buttermilk, but and also like we love to use vinegar if we wanted to make any kind of like a flaky dough. It is a tradition. It is my mom rule in my pie dough recipes and biscuit recipes, and whenever I'm making just I wanted to make and it's kind of like a flaky dough, I always add a little bit vinegar
I
in
love
my
that.
dough. Make it a little bit flaky.
Yes.
Because we wanted to just have a flaky baklava. So for this reason, we add apple cider vinegar. But of course, they can use. The other day, I was making again one more time. I used white vinegar.
So now we're going to add some all-purpose flour and some
Mhm.
salt. Do you like to use kosher salt?
Yes, if I have kosher salt, I use kosher salt for my dough. But
Okay.
they can use any kind of salt too.
Okay. And now using our hand in sort of a claw shape, we are going to stir and squeeze the ingredients together for like 2 to 3 minutes until everything begins to come together. And I had two questions. One, do you ever use, I know not in a video, but would you ever use a stand mixer or a hand mixer when making dough?
First of all, I use stand mixer for all my enriched dough because enriched dough is so different than the other doughs. You have to knead it so well. It is so hard to make it by hand. So I always use a stand mixer for my enriched dough. But for that kind of dough recipes, it is so easy to make. I feel like, oh my God, this is too much to use stand mixer. I can make it really fast because I got to use just my hands. It's just make it easier for me
How come we don't put two hands in?
because you have to use the other hands to hold the bowl. It's going to make it a little bit easier to handle all of the pieces, and otherwise your both hand is so dirty. You can just handle it, and what are you going to put? And if the bowl is moving and you're going to just try to handle, how are you going to push it? Just keep it in the same place. It's just my style is to hold the bowl with my hands, the other hand using just and knead the dough.
And now we're going to turn the dough out onto a work surface. And do we need to flour our work surface?
No,
Okay.
not need, because
Okay.
it's a very, very buttery dough.
We'll use both hands and we'll just perform a basic kneading technique on the dough for about 6 to 8 minutes until smooth. Can you tell us what would you say your basic kneading technique is?
Exactly. It is the really common techniques, and then I use this technique so much. And also I explain it in my cookbook because people are just keep asking me how they're gonna knead the dough effectively because kneading is so important for the perfect dough. So first of all, if they need just they can just like the flour work service. I'm not mentioning it in the recipe, they not need to just add a flour. So first of all, they're gonna just just transfer the dough onto a work surface, and then using their hands, they're gonna gently press the dough and push it away from themselves. And then again, they're gonna use their fingers. They can use their fingers, and then using their fingers, they're gonna draw it back toward themselves, and then rotate the dough about 4 to 5 degrees, and then repeat this process 5 to 10 minutes, depend on the recipe instruction.
And you're sort of pushing it away almost like with the palm of your hand.
Yes,
And then
exactly.
pulling it back on top of itself, turning and pushing out again with the palm of your hand.
Cool.
And then once it's smooth, we'll cover with plastic wrap and we'll let it rest for about 1.5 hours at room temperature. Does the dough change at this time? Does it look different after an hour and a half?
Definitely. First of all, it will not look so perfect in the it is gonna be still looks like a little like a type of rough dough, and then they can feel like, oh, this is not perfect. It's totally okay. And then after 1.5 hours later, they're gonna see the dough is getting like a little softer and the texture is a little bit different because the gluten is getting more just appear a little bit more and then it's affect the texture. It is totally okay, and every single part it's gonna be more beautiful.
After 1.5 hours, we'll return the dough to the work surface and we'll continue to knead it for about 3 to 5 minutes more. Then we will return it to the bowl again. This time we're going to cover it and let it rest for about 1.5 to 2 hours. And what will it look like after that second long rest?
It is gonna be perfect dough. It is gonna be so smooth and kind of like a Play-Doh. It is gonna looks like a kind of a Play-Doh. It is not like a too hard, but soft, perfectly smooth, and very beautiful Play-Doh.
So while the dough is resting, we're going to make the syrup. And in a saucepan, what kind of saucepan are you using when you're not using like a vintage saucepan?
Generally use, what was the name? All clad
I was just
sauce.
going to say, was it all clad? Yeah.
All clad.
In a saucepan, we're going to stir together some granulated sugar, some water, and some salt. And this is essentially like a simple syrup, but I wondered, why are we adding a little bit of salt?
Because this is my older sister's secret. She always add a little bit of salt in her simple syrup because it just appear the taste a little bit more like affect the taste a little bit. I generally people can realize that I generally use a little bit salt for my all of my dessert recipes or my sweet recipes, a little bit sugar for my savory recipes. It is the secret to make the delicious pastry. Again, she just add a little bit salt to make it tastier.
In my last cookbook, it's a savory baking book, and I put a little bit of sugar in so many of the batters and the doughs, even though they're savory recipes, because it seasons the dough. Just like salt does, I put the sugar in the savory recipe because it seasons it.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
This is the secret.
So now we're going to bring that to a boil over medium-high heat. And once it's boiling, we're going to squeeze in some lemon juice and add some lemon rind. Why are we adding the juice and the rind? Is that just for flavor?
We are adding the lemon juice because we don't want it to just crystallize meanwhile, because it's gonna just help to keep it perfect texture. And also I'm adding lemon with whole lemon in this syrup. It's give a little bit flavor. So it is great.
And now we're going to reduce the heat to medium, low, and simmer for about 11 to 13 minutes. And I love this tip. The syrup is ready when you dip a teaspoon into the syrup, and when you shake off a little bit of excess, the remaining syrup slowly drips off the spoon. I love that description. And if it falls quickly off the spoon, then you need to simmer for 2 to 3 minutes more.
Yes. And also, plus, if they're using internal temperature, they can just check with the internal temperature. It must be just 215 to 220 Fahrenheit. But I wanted to just give this quick tip if they don't have an internal temperature.
So now we're going to remove the syrup from the heat and we'll let it cool to room temperature. Now we're going to take our dough. We're going to turn it out onto a lightly floured work surface. We're going to roll the dough into a log and using a sharp knife or a bench scraper, we're going to cut it into 20 equal portions. When you do this at home, do you weigh them?
Yeah, I generally do that.
And then we're going to take each little piece and we're going to roll it into a smooth ball. When you're turning it into a ball, do you do that trick where you're like pulling kind of the top of the dough underneath the bottom? Or is it more just rolling between two hands?
First of all, I piece the edges, the dough together to make a rough ball, and then I'm rolling it.
Nice. And then we're going to place each ball on a plate just as we work and cover them with plastic wrap. I assume we don't want like a dry kind of skin to form on the dough while we're working.
Yes, definitely.
And then we're going to finish up our recipe. So in a small saucepan, before we start rolling out our dough, in a small saucepan, we're going to melt some unsalted butter, some neutral oil again, and sort of mix that together. And again, why are we adding both butter? I know before we added the oil to the dough in addition to the butter because for kind of the texture and the malleability of the dough, but why are we adding the oil here?
Because it make it a little not so heavy. Using butter, only butter is make it a little heavy and then you can eat so much. My older sister always just add a little bit just neutral oil. And sometimes she add a little bit cream too, but I didn't add this time.
We're going to lightly cover our work surface with cornstarch. So you probably have gloves on because you hate cornstarch.
Definitely, but the other day I had to taste. I have to just make the recipe. I shoot the recipe.
Yeah.
I have to make it for my Instagram page. And I didn't use gloves because of the reason. And it was it was awful. And then just after the shooting, you had to see my lips because I bite them so much, like randomly. It was just because I'm touching the cornstarch.
Yes.
And it was just so interesting.
Oh, that's hilarious. So we're going to lightly cover our work surface with cornstarch and we're going to place one of the balls of dough on the surface. And using a rolling pin, we're going to roll it into a 6 to 7 inch round. Is there a particular type of rolling pin or a brand of rolling pin that you like?
Generally, I use a just hand rolling pin. I found a rolling pin I found them from an antique store. Just make it a little easier. They can use any kind of like a rolling pin for this part. But yeah, just I use hand style small rolling pin that I found from antique store.
So now we're going to add a tablespoon of cornstarch on top of the dough and cover it evenly, rub it in with our hands. Then we're going to take another ball of dough, do the exact same thing, and kind of stack one on top of the other, but we're going to shingle it a teeny bit, which I think just means we don't put one exactly on top of the other. We kind of put one down and then one that's kind of slightly off center on top.
Yes, because just we don't want it to just stick them together and then we make sure like they're together but they're not sticking together.
So we're going to make sure that we've really nicely covered in cornstarch so they don't stick.
Yeah.
And then we'll continue to make 10 stacks of 2 pieces of dough. So 10 total, 20 rounds total.
Yes, but just, group of 2.
Yes, groups of 2. Then we'll take 2, and now we're actually going to put them right on top of each other. Yes? And we're going to use a long rolling pin, like maybe with tapered edges. I wondered about when you said long, should it be extra long? Is that important? I know is it called a Turkish oklava?
Yes, definitely. This is so important. I really wanted to just talk about this part because it's so important to roll the dough a little bit as thin as possible. So this is the secret to make it a little thin, like a little more than normal. But if they're using a regular rolling pin, they can make group of 4 because it can make it a little easier and because it's going to be a little bit thicker dough and then they can make it a little bit easier. So otherwise, I highly recommend to use Turkish oklava or a little bit longer rolling pin to roll it as thin as possible.
Can you describe a Turkish oklava?
It is like very long and thin rolling pin, wooden pin. If wanted to just use the rolling pin, we generally use this one. I
Okay.
started to use the other one in here in the US right after moving here. We generally roll the dough around the rolling pin, dough pieces, and then push and rock the pin a few times. Then unroll the dough and then repeat the process starting from another side to make evenly flat and as thin as possible. This is just the technique to roll the baklava
Did you
dough.
say that we're rolling the dough around the?
Yeah, around the rolling pin.
Wow.
This is the reason why are we using only just a thin and long rolling
Ah,
pin.
okay. But you're saying that if it's too hard for people to do just 2 rounds, because we're rolling it into an 18 to 20-inch round, you're saying if it's too much for people to do that with just 2 rounds because it has to be so thin, you can do it with 4?
Yeah, you
Okay.
can make group of 4. And also, to be honest, they can roll the dough into just 18 to 20 inch if they're using only regular rolling pin,
Oh,
but they was only just to roll it as much as thin as
I
they can.
understand. 18 to 20-inch would just be way too big. I understand.
Yeah.
Now we're going to sprinkle this large circle with additional cornstarch to make it easy to roll. And then when it's big and thin, we'll take a 9 by 13-inch baking dish and we will place it down and we will use a knife to cut out a 9 by 13-inch rectangle. So I
Yeah.
had a couple of questions. When you place the 9 by 13-inch, are you using like a metal pan?
Yeah, just I generally use Cuisinart.
Yeah, because you want I assume you want like the edges to be sharp. You want a sharp rectangle.
Yeah, not need exactly because
Okay.
we're gonna cut it down and then not need to be so sharp,
Okay.
but they can use metal one.
Okay. And
But
then we're
it's okay if they're using a glass one too, or
okay.
any baking dish.
Okay.
It's
So in
totally
other words, the corners of the rectangle don't have to be super sharp.
no,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay. And now could you also just use a ruler for cutting out the 9 by 13-inch shape? If you didn't want to use a pan, could you just measure it out with a ruler?
I never use it, but yeah, of course,
Okay.
definitely. Why not?
Okay.
They can just make it same in the techniques and then they can use.
Yep. And then for cutting, do you like to use a paring knife? Do you like to use a chef's knife?
I use generally chef knife.
Okay. So we're going to trace the bottom of the baking dish onto the dough and cut. And then we're going to place that dough rectangle right into the base of the dish that we just used for cutting, yes?
Yeah.
That we just used as our template. And then we're going to take the scraps of the dough, because that was a really big circle. We cut out the 9 by 13-inch shape. Then we'll use the scraps to make another layer of dough on top. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. We are using the remaining part as a second layer because we wanted to make 40 layer. The rule for the baklava, it has to be just 40 layer.
Yeah.
So we are trying to make sure we are making 40 layer of the dough.
I love that. 40 layers. Okay, so now we take those scraps and we kind of, like it's a jigsaw puzzle, we just kind of put them on top of the first piece, just trying to fill out the gaps and make it cover, yes?
Definitely.
Okay, perfect. Then we're going to drizzle 2 tablespoons of that butter oil mixture over our 2 layers, and then we're going to repeat this process of rolling out, cutting out the shape, using the scraps, drizzling our oil and butter. We'll do that with 4 stacks of dough, which is basically 8 of our round. We'll have 8 layers.
Definitely.
Okay. Now we're going to spread some coarsely ground Turkish Antep pistachios. First of all, how did we grind them? So it says coarsely ground. Do we do that like in a food processor?
Of course. They can put it in the Ziploc and then they can
just crush it. Great.
Correct.
And when you say spread, are we kind of sprinkling them on, or is there a lot of nut butter so it's almost like it's spreadable?
No. We are going to just using our hands there. We are going to spread evenly.
Perfect. So we'll spread it with the pistachios. Then we're going to roll out 2 more dough stacks. So that'll be 4 more layers, and put those on top of the pistachio with the drizzle. And then we're going to add more pistachios and then continue another layer of pistachios and then continue to roll and add the dough layers until all the dough has been used up.
Definitely.
Yay! And
You
then
made it.
at this point, do we need to press down at all, or do we need to chill, or we just preheat our oven and it's time to bake?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
We did that and then we just we're done and we're gonna cut it right now.
Oh,
We're done.
right. Yes. So we use a sharp knife. Again, is this still the chef's knife?
Yes,
Eh,
of course. It has to be sharp.
Okay. And we're going to cut the baklava into 1.5-inch squares. And are you cutting all the way through, or are you just kind of scoring the top?
No, we have to just cut it all of the way through.
Okay. And is it pretty easy to do if your knife is sharp?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Perfect.
It's so
Because the dough is so thin. The layers are so
Mhm.
thin. Now we're going to
Yes.
pour the remaining butter and oil evenly over the top. And then you write, be careful to avoid the milk solids on the bottom of the pan. The milk solids are coming from the melted butter?
Yes, definitely. If they feel like, oh, okay, maybe I can use the milk liquid for the baklava, they have to be careful to avoid it. They can just pour the melted butter first of all in another bowl, and then they can add the neutral oil over top. Otherwise, they have to make sure they never use the milk liquids.
Why? What happens if you add the milk
Just
solids?
affect the texture, and also
Ah.
it's gonna give it a little some kind of like a what can I just say? They make a little shape and then weird
Like
shape.
almost like a little curdle.
Curdle, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And the milk
I
solids come from the melted butter kind of cooling a little bit?
At the bottom, you have some milky bits at the bottom, so we don't want it to just use this one. So
Okay.
they have to make sure we are just not using it. Otherwise, just they can pour the melted part and then they can add the neutral oil after that.
Perfect. So we're going to bake the baklava in a 350-degree oven until it's golden brown, about 45 to 50 minutes. Then we'll let it
Mhm.
rest for about 2 to 3 minutes before pouring the cooled syrup that we made over the hot baklava. And then we will set this aside at room temperature to allow that syrup to fully soak in. I bet the fact that it's hot allows that syrup to really soak in for like
Definitely.
4 to 5 hours or even overnight.
Yeah, it can seem a little too much syrup. They can feel, okay, I added too much. No, no, no. It's gonna soak all of the syrup and it is totally okay.
And then we're going to serve slices with remaining pistachios, either beneath or on top or both of the baklava pieces. This sounds so delicious, Betül. I want it right now.
We have right now in the kitchen. Do you want some?
I wish.
would love
I'm
to
coming to
pass.
Virginia. I want to come over.
Oh, please come to me.
Oh, well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Betül. And I just want to say that you are my cherry pie.
Oh, thank you so much. It was so nice to be here and then to chat with you. Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for today's show. Don't forget to follow She's My Cherry Pie on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and tell your pals about us. You can find today's recipe at cherrybomb.com. She's My Cherry Pie is a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. Thank you to Good Studio in Brooklyn. Our producers are Carrie Diamond, Catherine Baker, and Jenna Sadu. Thank you so much for listening to She's My Cherry Pie, and happy baking!